Hello again, me and Stokey with Mastermind Games, back with more Malifaux and Lord Chompy Bits. Chaotic Red. Lord Chompy Bits is the name that the Dreamer gave to the tyrant entity known as Nightmare. Long ago, the natives of Malifaux, who eventually became the Neverborn, basically called down the apocalypse on their world to get rid of a group of 13 beings called the Tyrant Entities. While they were able to strip them of their bodies, they could not destroy their malevolent spirits. And now they're back and need a host with a physical body to attach to. This can be living or undead. I'm going to be doing some blending here, wet on wet painting. Rosy Skin 09068. And Nightmare chose the Dreamer, but found he could not overcome the boy's creativity. Instead of fearing him, the Dreamer saw him as more of a playmate, giving him the name Lord Chompy Bits. And for his part, Nightmare doesn't really care what people call him. Lord Chompy Bits is as good a name as any. And I will be playing around with the highlight and shading here. I want to get a nice solid coat of this first. And yeah, this is one of the largest models in Malifaux, at least in the second edition, but as far as base size goes, 50mm is as big as they come. Another aspect of the Tyrants is they were not the original rulers of Malifaux and actually banded together and overthrew Titania, the Queen of the Fae, who were apparently the Neverborn's ancestors, or at least in part, but turned out to be so much worse that the denizens brought down the Grave Spirit, which another master, Seamus, is obsessed with. So the Grave Spirit is not a tyrant entity, but is a major player in the game. Now, kind of basing this paint scheme loosely off the Pinky Demon from Doom. So we'll see how well I pull it off. I want a bit of this. He's got eyes on the insides of his horns as well. In game, at least in the second edition, the Dreamer would gradually fade out, and Lord Chompy Bits would gradually fade in. Trading summoning for raw muscle. And early on, the Dreamer basically interpreted what Lord Chompy Bits was really doing as playing games, but as he's growing older and more sadistic, the Dreamer's not deluding himself as much, it seems. And while the color scheme here is going to be fairly simple, the surface area I have to cover is quite expansive, which is why I'm using a larger brush, but I still need to make sure I'm being meticulous here and not too reckless, I suppose is the word I'm looking for. There's not much more to be said of Nightmare himself. There's not much more to him that has been revealed yet. I'll be doing the tail dead last, just because it's sticking out so much more. Loincloth, that'll be picked out later. There's a bit of chainmail on it as well. And I am aware this looks a bit splotchy, and that's fine by me. It'll help sell the illusion of this creature being partially intangible. And if some of this distorts the coloration of the stonework on the base, that's fine too, because, again, Lord Chompy Bits is one of the tyrant entities, and the Dreamer is directly possessed of reality warping powers, so mussing up the color of a sidewalk is well within what they're capable of. This is wiggling a bit as I paint it, that's okay, it's fairly sturdy. Okay. On the toes there. That thigh. Now switching to a smaller brush. And yellow bone 09143. Again, doing wet on wet, so I do also have to work fairly quickly here. So we're getting the fang-filled mouth. And if you hear that thumping, that's my neighbors going at it with their stereos again. I do believe they are trying to be DJs because they keep playing the same sound segments over and over again. Now by painting wet on wet, and I'll be doing the same thing when I get to the shading, at least on the horns and the flesh. This should blend it in together a little better, make the boundaries between areas less distinct, which is what I'm going for in this case. To give the impression of something with an ever-shifting physique. This is one form Lord Chompy Bits could take, but it's not necessarily the only one you could take. And the tyrants, first and foremost, are spiritual entities in their current forms. And even those that are bound to hosts, well, they have some mutability. So the plague, for example, which has dominated Hamlin, which I've done previously, takes Hamlin's form because he likes it. December, bound to Rasputina, which I will probably not end up doing a video for because I already have her and painted her long before I started doing these videos. Has a more bestial form that he prefers. Which has become evident in some of his previous failures at attempting to possess Rasputina's body in whole. And the wind has suddenly started to pick up. I'm not going to worry about that right this minute. Great on frame rate so far, but then again, my system does seem to like the larger models. I'm trying to do one section at a time so I don't lose my place, meaning one arm at a time, one leg at a time, etc., etc. I see I've missed a piece of the back of the hand. There's something a little different there, and just touch that up with the ivory here. That'll be fine. Now the legs, we'll do claw and nub first. These spurs. Though I could also do those as flames. Claws on his toes are definitely more distinct as being separate from the rest. Alright. Yeah, this is pretty meticulous. Picking up the barbs along the back of the tail. Ending with the stinger, which is more like a blade than anything else. It's obviously intended to be as such. A little water thin that out. Going back to the flesh tone and a little more on the feet here. Alright, let that dry, move on to the next. Alright, some bits are dry, but I can move on. Shield Brown 09161. I'm actually going to start on the inside of the loincloth here. Or as best as I can get, this is undercuts here. And this isn't a model that where a partial assembly is practical either. And there's a fair amount of chainmail on this, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. Pick it out later in appropriate colors. Though with the name changes coming, that some models have had their names changed for 3rd edition. I don't think Lord Chompy Bits is one of those, but maybe. Again, all I've got is the Dead Man's Hand pack, and no actual rule books or faction books yet. primarily because the first printing of 3rd edition sold out quickly. There's a second printing on the way, I've heard, but I don't know when that's going to be available, so it's going to have to be patient. Especially since I was in the middle of a large project relating to Malifaux, making custom terrain pieces, uniform gray, for all the special battlefield structures that could be used in story encounters. When 3rd edition was announced, I kind of put that on hiatus. We'll see if I get back to it or not. It'll depend completely on what happens when I see the 3rd edition rulebook. If those pieces still exist, then I'll continue the project. If they don't, then I will scrap it and use the materials and partially completed pieces for my Battlegrounds terrain sets I sell at my web store. Rework them, revamp them, make them something completely different. So, bottom of the field is very dry, but I think it's dry enough to work with. So I'm going to be one more base coat, and that'll be the chainmail once this is dried up enough. Might do a second coat on this gray, but alright. Might do a second coat on the gray, but that's good enough. Let that dry and move on. Okay. Plate mail metal. That windstorm out there is getting worse and worse. Some kind of precipitation's coming in my area. I'm not sure if it's going to be snow or rain, but we'll just see. A little more water. The key here is short, controlled strokes. And normally I'd use a shorter brush for this, so you can get more control from a shorter brush than a longer one. I just don't have a shorter brush on hand right this minute. And that gets that, so once all this is dried up, I can start shading. Okay, time to shade. Blackened Steel 09205. That's the only one I can do at this time. As I said earlier, I want the flesh and horn tones to blend together, but that's not the case with the loincloth. Thinning it out into a wash with half paint, half water, or I suppose be a little more accurate, 1 part paint, 1 part water, but on darker colors like straight black, you'll want to use 2 to 3 parts water to 1 part paint. That bled out a bit, and that's also why you want to work from the highest area to the lowest when you are shading. It makes it easier to deal with overflow like that. Okay. And once that dries, I can get the loincloth and go on from there. Next, Woodstain Brown 09160. avoid nicking the steel. Just going for a nice solid coat on the cloth. There we go. Pop that bubble there. Now we're good. Okay. Yeah. Vampire red. This is my 4th attempt at this. My computer was having a conniption fit earlier. I tried using that forward array, but gotta love it when equipment throws a temper tantrum. Not that one. Just need to get the right brush. And going one section at a time. Make sure I don't miss anything. It's critical in this stage. I don't miss anything. I'm just getting a nice solid coverage with the shade here. Also need to work fairly quickly because I do want to do the wet on wet blending with the ivory, so. And I'm dripping on somewhere. That's alright. It's one of the talons. You can really see on this how it's going in between the gaps or recessed areas between the muscles, especially on the bicep there. Making sure I'm not dropping hundreds of frames a second. Finish up the chest and the arm. Okay, I'm hearing. Okay, I'm okay. Just starting to hear the bad noises again from the computer. Once again, I will probably never grow tired of this joke. The more technology advances, the more and more things are turning out like that Mel Brooks movie Spaceballs. It's kind of visible on this also are some of the seams where he was assembled, so it's not a completely flush fit. And now I am dropping hundreds of frames a second, but I can't stop now. Timing is too important for what I'm trying to accomplish here, so just groan, move on, keep at it, have to deal with it later. Very frustrating though. Stained Ivory 09142. Starting approximately where I started with the red, at least in the same neighborhood. And, well, most of it's not dried yet. Some parts are drying already. So we'll need to do this fairly swiftly. This is also, again, why just stopping the recording and trying again later is not an option here. Because I've got one chance to do this right, and not much time to do it in. Okay. And I just got the inside of the mouth and the base do, and I can start highlighting and detailing. Okay, some of that's still not completely dry, but it's dry enough to work with. So matte black, I can go ahead and do his eyes now. Not too much of this. And just keep my brush moist, using just enough water to thin the paint. Going for just a dead black again, like I've been doing for Neverborn. And he has many eyes. Okay. Hope I didn't miss any. Red brick 09001. Get the inside of his mouth, and if any of this bleeds onto the ivory of his teeth, that's fine. He's a gruesome killer. And Stormy Gray 09088 to finish up the base. Now some of the red down here isn't completely dry, and it'll blend in a bit. And that's okay in this case. Again, Lord Chompy Bits is an entity of almost godlike power, being brought into the physical world by another being whose dominant power is manipulating reality to serve his whims. Which actually is really interesting because there's only one other master whose tyrant found him on Earth. That would be a Shenlong, I think is his name, Ten Thunders guy, bound to the dragon. More or less hid on Earth, apparently. But if the Dreamer's body is still on Earth, that means Nightmare found him there. And nearly every other master has come into their power after arriving on Malifaux, which means the Dreamer is particularly special and particularly terrifying in that regard. So that's it for shading. Once it's dry, I can highlight and wrap up. Okay, highlighting. Going for a dry brushing technique, so Vampire Red. Start with the inside of the mouth. With your base coats, you want to go from the lowest area to the highest, shading highest to lowest, highlighting lowest to highest. Ragged feathered brush. No water, straight paint. Rub most of it out on your paper towel. It looks like there's nothing left. And then that's the area to be affected. I'm focusing on the most readily visible portion, so just the tongue here. And I just punched out in the light. Now, Warlock Purple for the highlight on the flesh. This is a new pot, so it needs a little extra mixing. I haven't used this before, but it looks like it should do what I want it to do. Yeah, this should be okay. Going along the body. And this is working out so far. It's giving a nice, disturbing skin tone to it that looks partially human. I think that makes it more effective than going, say, just dark violet or bright red for skin. Those are commonly associated with demons and monsters and inhuman things, but they say we are not offended by the alien so much as we are offended by the familiar, or per se the parts of us we don't want to admit we have. Impressed by and kind of wanting to showcase that with the Neverborn being kind of examples of humanity at its worst. Or at least symbolic of that anyway. And there we go, that's not too bad at all. Frame rate dropped a few, but alright. Creamy Ivory 09144. Just need to pick out the right brush. That should do. It's a little beat up and might not be able to use it for much longer, but it'll work well enough for this model. focusing on the most readily available, or readily visible surfaces, excuse me. A lot of surface area to cover. Just about done. Okay. Well, 3 left. Driftwood Brown 09162. Here the important part is the flesh. So just a quick brush over on the loincloth. And True Silver 09207. And Misty Gray 09090 for the base. Okay. Last step is switching to a flathead brush. Matte black. edge of the base. Just cleaning it up. This could be any color you want. Just cleaning it up. If you're going to do flock or sand, you'll do this before applying that. And there we go. Lord Chompy Bits in all his monstrous glory. Coppelius is next. Until then, I am Ian Stuckey with Mastermind Games, signing out.